So welcome, everyone. My name is Casey Saylor, and I am the Older Adult Project Manager at the Mental Health Association of Maryland, where I primarily oversee our Baltimore County programming. So I know that a number of you are joining us from the Baltimore County Senior Center Network. We are so excited to have you. And as I mentioned, this is being recorded. So please, if you have any friends that were interested and didn't get to come today, I will let you know when that recording's up and you can share it with anyone you think may enjoy it. So I want to invite folks to introduce yourself, use your first name if you'd like, and what brings you to today's presentation. Just a sentence to help me understand what brings us all here today and what do we perhaps need to cover based on what you're looking for. Would anyone like to introduce themselves?
Oh, I'm Linda, and I guess I'm interested in talking about, dating as we age.
Got it. Thank you, Linda.
Okay, I'm Joan, and that is also my interest.
Got it. 2 for dating. Thank you both.
I'm Barbara. I'm interested in the dating aspect of it, but also more like meeting people. It's just difficult for me since I'm not in the workforce as actively as I was, and I don't have a social network like I used to. So developing those. I'm not particularly interested in internet dating. I know that's what a lot of the younger people do, but I haven't found that to be successful for me. So I'm looking for other alternatives.
Got it. Thank you, Barbara. And I did include some of our content from the part 2, which was more geared at friendships and meeting people. But there is some of that content in today's because it, clearly it kind of pulls over into the dating conversation too. But I want to invite you to check out the recording of part 2 once it's on our YouTube page, which zooms in more on that friendship topic.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, glad you're here.
This is Ricardo. I'm also interested in dating. I am dating and I am in a relationship. I've been widowed for 11 years, and the title of your presentation today intrigued me when I saw it. So I'm a first-time joiner of your group.
Welcome, Ricardo. So glad you're here.
Well, I'll go. Hello, I'm Madeline, and I'm interested in dating because, and meeting people. I find there are different issues that come with age, and I felt like I wanted to hear what others had to say, and that's why I'm here.
My name is Emily, and I'm here because I'm also interested in knowing what the dating world is like out there at this ripe old age of 72. So I'd like to hear what some other people are doing, where they're going to meet people, and some of the difficulties they might be encountering.
I love that question, Emily, that you said, where are people going to meet people? So I want to invite folks, I'm going to jot that down to if we have time to specifically discuss that as we go, but if anyone has any answers to that question, I want to invite you to put them in the chat. Like where, if you are actively dating or actively trying to meet people for friendships or others, what kind of things are you doing? Go ahead and put those in the chat so we can all share those ideas. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves and why they're here today?
Hello, my name's Josie. I just happened to see this yesterday and excuse me, and I thought, why not? check it out, see what it's about. It's been a while since I've dated. Interested in meeting a person of the opposite sex, and friends. So that's why I'm here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Josie. And I want to invite folks, since we are recording this, just if you aren't speaking, please mute yourselves so we can all clearly hear the person who is speaking. Background noise happens. There was someone else that was about to speak.
That would have been me. My name is Rose. It shows up as Rosa on the screen. This is my first time in the session. Like the last speaker, I basically just found out about this class. So I missed parts 1 and 2. But
Okay.
I am basically here just to kind of get some ideas on meeting other single people in my age group.
Got it. Well, welcome, Rose.
Thank
So
you.
glad you're here. And I am very excited to share the recordings of part 1 and 2 with everyone. So if you did miss those and you're interested, you can certainly watch those later. And the introduction to relationship psychology bit that we covered in both, we are going to be covering here today too. So you didn't miss that. All right. Any final introductions before we move on? All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here today. Both, those of you who have introduced yourselves and those who have not. We are so excited to have you here. And we had a number of people just join, so I just want to name that the session is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube page along with parts 1 and 2. So you will all receive an email once those are posted. So I would love to give an overview rather, of a brief introduction to relationship psychology, just an overview of some ideas and principles before we dive into these particular topics. So we have a number of neurotransmitters in our brains, and one of these is oxytocin. And oxytocin is known as the love hormone. It helps us to bond with other people. It is a chemical that our brains naturally produce when we experience a romantic relationship, friendship, motherhood, fatherhood, and it doesn't have to be biological motherhood or fatherhood. It could be foster, adoptive, any kind of bonding relationship with another person produces oxytocin in our brains. And research shows that this oxytocin actually helps to decrease our stress and anxiety levels when it's released. And that is exciting because another hormone that we interact with regularly is called cortisol. And cortisol is the stress hormone. And it shows up in our daily lives when things change, right? Maybe it's a good change, maybe it's a not so good change, but when something happens, cortisol often shows up and it lets us know when we're in danger. It's connected to our fight, flight, or fight response. And this brain chemical, the whole purpose is to keep us safe. Now, our society nowadays is very different from, the early man when cortisol was in our bodies to help protect us from that predator that's, perhaps stalking us in the trees, right? We hear a crack of a stick, the cortisol shows up, and it's like, all right, I need to protect myself from this threat. Our society is a bit different. And so the kind of threats that we interact with on a daily basis may include other things like getting a phone call from someone you don't really want to talk to, getting an email with some bad news, seeing something that makes you upset on the news, along with other things such as car accidents or interactions, whatever it may be, we all, I think, know what stresses us out. And I just want to name that the chemical in our brains that's attached to that is cortisol. So from a relationship psychology point of view, we want to stimulate oxytocin, that love hormone, and suppress cortisol, the stress hormone in our relationships. And there are a couple tips to help do this. And this is, as I mentioned, in all kinds of relationships, not just the dating and romantic relationships we're talking about today. So some steps to do this can include take a step back when you're experiencing conflict, because conflict occurs in all relationships. It's natural. And take time out to gather thoughts before having conversations, right? In other presentations, I talk about something called the amygdala hijack, which is a natural, kind of process that our brain goes through where we can get caught up in the cortisol of the moment, basically. And our amygdala lights up, and it's very distracting, and it keeps us from thinking clearly and communicating what we perhaps actually want to say. It's the difference between, I can't open this jar, I'm going to go get the tool from the drawer, right? Thinking clearly, versus I can't open this jar, I'm going to slam it on the counter, right? So take a step back during conflict and gather your thoughts. Give your amygdala time to calm down, because it naturally just kind of jumps into action when we're in conflict. Set a specific time period during the day to talk about conflict in your relationships. If it doesn't happen during that time, let it go. Individually practice healthy coping mechanisms and self-care. One of the principles we'll cover in a couple minutes is how a relationship includes everyone participating, right, including us. And so in order for us to show up best in relationships, we need to take care of ourselves and practice those healthy coping mechanisms. When it comes to families or maybe just your relationship with another person, practice self-care together. Identify things that are meaningful to all of you and help all of you perhaps calm down or bring those cortisol levels down, and do them together. That not only will help to regulate everyone's cortisol levels, but produce that oxytocin in the relationship and help to strengthen it. Physical touch also helps produce oxytocin, so hug once a day and rehash things that you have in common and that you enjoy doing with the other person. Our brains naturally like to seek out the differences in relationships. They like to figure out what's different between you and me, and we need to, it's called a negativity bias. And one of the things that we can do to help have positive relationships is to put a pause on that, to notice that it's happening and that we naturally lean towards that, and to pause and really rehash the things that we have in common and enjoy doing together, and then perhaps make them happen. Celebrate the strengths and work on weaknesses. There are strengths to every individual and every relationship, and every person has their weaknesses as well, and every relationship does too. So noticing what the strengths are, naming them. We all need cheerleaders in our lives, and we need to be cheerleaders for ourselves and each other in our relationships. And if there's a weakness that is negatively impacting the relationship, name it and work on it together. As I mentioned, our relationships need oxytocin. It is the brain chemical that literally helps to bond us together. And some of the just everyday things that we can do to produce that oxytocin in relationships include making eye contact, that physical touch, hugs, kisses, petting pets, dogs, cats produces oxytocin in our brains, performing acts of altruism, whether we do that for someone else or they do it for us, giving empathy and receiving empathy, right? Both ways produces that oxytocin too. Salvador Mnuchin was a family therapist born and raised in Argentina. He developed structural family therapy, which addresses problems within a family by charting the relationships between family members. And Salvador Mnuchin describes family relationships as a dance, where each person's movement is highly dependent on the movement of the others. And so this illustration on the screen just limits it to 1 to 2 individuals, right? Person A and person B. But as you add individuals, perhaps in a larger family, those numbers, those letters rather, also fit in here, right? And so to illustrate what Salvador mnuchin is saying here, person A starts an interaction, right? And then person B is influenced by how that interaction started and will respond. They will take in how person A interacted with them and respond based on that. And then based on person B's response, person A gets to respond again. So it's a back and forth taken of the information. And I can give you an example using myself and my husband. If I go downstairs for lunch and he says, "How was your day? I'm having an awful day." And I may hear this kind of anger in his voice and think, okay, so this is pointed at me, and I may respond a bit defensively based on that initial interaction. And because of my defensive response, he may respond in turn feeling more agitated, right? And then it becomes a back and forth. And as you can see, this illustration isn't a very positive interaction potentially. And the reason I'm naming this back and forth for you, and imagine if there's a third person in there who gets to respond, right? Perhaps that makes the situation worse. But I'm naming this for you because it doesn't have to make the situation worse. If we can see the A plus B plus A plus B pattern in our interactions and note, okay, I'm responding to them, we can pause and ask ourselves, is this how I want this interaction to keep going? Am I presenting the response that will continue this interaction in the direction it's going? And if so, is that the direction I want it to go? And in my husband's case, no, I want him to feel better. So if I notice myself responding defensively based on that initial interaction, I can pause and think to myself, okay, I want to de-escalate this and I want him to feel better. How can I respond instead? Thus creating a new pattern, a new step in the dance that starts bringing us in a different, more positive direction. Another theory in relationship psychology comes from William James. And William James was a psychologist and philosopher who had a major influence on the development of psychology in the United States. He was active from 1842 to 1910. And he had many accomplishments, but he's often referred to as the father of American psychology. And William James had some theories about happiness. Now, looking at our relationships, whether they're family or other relationships, all relationships have some conflict and dysfunction. And every person is unique who's participating in the relationship. And happiness, ventured William James, is reflected in the ratio of someone's accomplishments to their aspirations or expectations. Now, if we adapt this theory to relationships, you get the equation shown on your screen here. Happiness equals success over expectation. Success being the degree that others meet our expectations. And I present you with this theory today as a tool to help think about, am I happy in the relationship interactions that I'm having with individuals lately? And if I'm not, how is this equation coming into play? What are my expectations of this relationship? And what is the degree that that person is meeting them? Because if the expectation is not consistently being met, chances are there's, some tumultuous, interactions in this relationship that perhaps may not be making you feel good or the other person feel good. And we can change our expectations. William James says that in order to achieve happiness, love, and acceptance, it's actually necessary to change your expectations. Now, I certainly want to acknowledge that, in situations that are abusive or where trauma is involved, boundaries are very important. And sometimes boundaries can't move. And in those cases, the expectation can still change potentially without moving the boundary, right? And, I can give a quick example. Perhaps in a situation where you have an emotionally abusive person in your life and you are distanced from them. That is one of your boundaries. I will not be in the same room as this person in order to protect myself. That is perfectly fine if that is the boundary that you've drawn. And what is your expectation of that person? Do you still communicate with them? And if so, do you expect them to change? And every time you talk to them, and are you disappointed every time they don't? And so a potential application in this scenario could be to alter that expectation, which would then alter their ability to meet the expectation, right? And potentially make the relationship a bit more palatable. Now, that is an extreme circumstance, of course. This can also apply in just our everyday interactions, right? If I stop expecting my 8-year-old to pick up the dirty laundry off the floor in the bathroom, I'm probably going to be happier to see them in the morning when they get out of the shower. So it can have some very simple applications as well. All right, so let's segue into our topical elements today that brought us to part 3. And I just want to give a shout out for anyone new who has joined us. If you are unmuted, can you please mute? And then when we have some questions, if you would like to contribute, you're welcome to unmute to contribute. All right. So looking particularly at separation and divorce, we'll start with this topic. Mental Health America has some tips for coping with these situations. Going through a separation or divorce can be very difficult, no matter the reason for it. It can turn your world upside down and make it hard to get through. Maybe you're actively working, maybe you're not, but it can just be hard to get through the day and stay productive in whatever that means for you. But there are things that you can do to get through this difficult adjustment. Mental Health America first offers to recognize that it's okay to have different feelings. It's normal to feel sad, angry, exhausted, frustrated, confused, and these feelings can be intense. You also may feel anxious about the future. Accept that reactions like these will lessen over time, even if the marriage was unhealthy. Venturing into the unknown is frightening. You can give yourself a break. Give yourself permission to feel and to function at a less than optimal level for a period of time. You may not be able to be quite as productive on the job or whatever that means for you in your day. And that's okay. That's okay. No one is Superman or Superwoman. Take time to heal, regroup, and re-energize. If you've ever heard of grief and grieving and how that can impact our brains and bodies, that process can also occur when a relationship ends. We are grieving the loss of what was, and that takes a toll on us, and we need to rest and be kind to ourselves during that period as we heal. Don't go through this alone. Sharing your feelings with friends and family can help you to get through this period. You can also consider joining a support group where you can talk to others who have similar experiences and similar situations. Isolating yourself can raise your cortisol stress levels, reduce your concentration, and get in the way of productivity, relationships, and your overall health. So don't be afraid to get outside help if you need it. That could also look like talking to a counselor, support groups, or just people in your network, faith leaders, whatever that means for you. Take care of yourself emotionally and physically. Be good to yourself and to your body. Take time out to exercise, eat well, relax, that self-care element. Keep to your normal routines as much as possible. Try to avoid making major decisions or changes in life plans. And alcohol, drugs, or cigarettes can be a dangerous way to cope. They can potentially lead to more problems. So Mental Health America advises to avoid them at this time. They also advise avoiding power struggles and arguments with your spouse or former spouse. If a discussion begins to turn into a fight, you can calmly suggest that you both try talking again later and either walk away or hang up the phone. There's an example of seeing that A-B pattern, right? And then walking away and setting a time period to address the conflict. You can take time to explore your own interests, reconnect with things that you enjoy doing apart from your spouse. Have you always wanted to take up painting or play on a softball team? Sign up for a class, invest in your hobbies, volunteer, take time to enjoy what you enjoy, and make new friends. Mental Health America also suggests positive thinking, which can be easier said than done. Things may not be the same, but finding new activities, friends, and moving forward with reasonable expectations will make this transition easier. Be flexible. If you have children, family traditions can still be important, but some of them may need to be adjusted. Help create new family activities that fit around this new situation. And Mental Health America also suggests that life will get back to normal, although normal may be different from what you had originally hoped. And being grounded in that idea. Now, during a separation or divorce, communication is often needed and difficult. And so we have a couple communication tips here in order to, potentially help that process. And communication starts with us. Take the time to understand your own feelings. Feelings that are suppressed don't just go away. They simply remain unexpressed. Suppressed feelings that we're keeping inside, can actually make us sick. They can make us physically ill. And it's important to know that all healthy people experience human emotions, including the negative ones, the ones that we say, oof, I don't want to be feeling this right now. Everyone feels those. And I am saying that to really normalize that you are not the only one that is experiencing these feelings, and taking the time to acknowledge that they're here can really help you and assist in your communication with the other person. Listening is just as important as speaking. We can practice active listening skills while we're with the other person. What are active listening skills? That includes things like, nonverbals, nodding, things that indicate, yes, I am listening to you. We can, lean towards them. Our tone of voice is an active listening skill. If we're responding, does our tone of voice indicate like, yes, I heard you? Or is it like, please stop talking right now? Our tone of voice can convey a lot without us even knowing it. So paying attention to our nonverbals and what they may be saying for us. And you can reflect what you're hearing back to the person and make sure you're understanding. I do this pretty often. If someone shares something with me, I'll say, okay, just for my understanding, I'm going to say this back to you to make sure I understand. Please let me know if it's correct. And then repeat back to them how you understood what they just presented to you. And that can be such a powerful exercise, not only in A, making them feel like you actually want to understand what they're saying, but B, what we hear someone say is not always what they meant to say. So you may say it back and then be like, oh no, that is not what I intended to say. Let's clarify. Using I statements to communicate our thoughts can be so helpful, especially during conflict. When we are communicating during conflict, it can be a tendency for all of us to say, well, you did this, right? And use those you statements as they show up. And I'm pointing, right? Because even if I don't point at them, that's what that statement is saying. It's saying you did something, and it can automatically make the other person defensive, regardless of what you're saying, right? You may be saying something that you don't mean to be negative, but just using those you statements can put people on edge. And so using I statements to communicate our thoughts can be a very helpful communication tool. So instead of saying, well, you didn't close the refrigerator door and it spoiled the food, we can use an I statement and say, I felt really upset when the refrigerator door was left open and the food spoiled, right? I avoided the you usage and redirected the statement to me and how that situation impacted me, which then may allow the conversation to continue in a productive manner without anyone getting defensive. And accepting responsibility for our own attitudes and behaviors is very important. That goes back to understanding our own feelings. And while that's step one, our own feelings inform our attitudes and behaviors. And so as we start to notice what we're feeling, how is that seeping into these other areas? How does that influence how I feel towards certain things or how I'm behaving in certain situations? And if they are influencing it, do I want to continue with that behavior or that attitude? Pause and ask yourself those questions. And if the answer is no, great. You see it, and now you can start to change, to make a change. Just a reminder of our dance and how that fits in. And de-escalation, right? The example I used for the dance was an escalated situation. And the idea is that we can pause and change the dance steps. But what are some ways that we can do that? And so I have some de-escalation techniques here to share with you. We can use a calm and unhurried approach. Maintain eye contact with the other person, have your hands open, and approach them from the front. You don't want to come up behind someone who is feeling escalated. You can get on their level. If they're sitting down, sit down with them. If they're standing up, stand up to be with them. Maintain an appropriate distance. Don't crowd them or make them feel crowded. Use those active listening skills we talked about and demonstrate what you want them to do, right? So instead of, trying to explain something to someone who is feeling escalated, we can physically show them, which may be able to be understood better. And I just want to name as well, we talked about cortisol earlier. And when someone is feeling escalated, right, we know what that feels like to be stressed and it's just, that's cortisol running through our system. And cortisol is a wonderful way of shutting down that thinking part of our brain. The critical thinking part of our brain that lets us take in information and really hear it and process it, that just naturally kind of turns off a bit when we are experiencing that influx of cortisol. And so that makes these de-escalation techniques even more important, because I want you to understand the brain science of what may be going on with a person that you are experiencing as very, like, maybe they're shouting, maybe they're escalated, they're stressed out. That cortisol is flooding their system and making it difficult for them to think clearly. And so for us to change the dance step, we need to interact in a de-escalating kind of way that will bring those cortisol levels down. That calm voice really helps in these scenarios. Make your voice level lower than theirs and keep your statements simple. Stick to the point and validate their feelings. Yes, I know you're angry right now. Provide reassuring responses. It'll be okay. Use their name to help ground them and offer choices, right? Instead of saying, well, we're going to do this, it'll be okay. Well, there's some things we could do, would you like to do this or this? And especially if you pair it with that calm voice and they need to pause and listen to hear you, right? That can help to start bring their system down as well. If there's a triggering something in the room that is stressing them out, remove that, whether it's a person, whether it's an item, whatever it may be, remove that from the room, get that out of sight. And if a potential audience is showing up to watch, move them away as well. That could only escalate the cortisol levels. And we can help to move the conversation to a place that's familiar. and safe for the person who was feeling escalated and stressed. Eliminate any potential distractions, turn off that TV, and give them a drink. And why am I saying give them a drink? Because when our body is eating or drinking, it automatically shifts that brain chemistry a bit to I am safe. And by doing that, it's called stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system. It starts to gradually work that cortisol out of our system and return us to that thinking brain. So I just threw a lot of stuff at you all, and I want to open it up for conversation. What kind of tips do you have for managing these relationships in a healthy way, specifically looking at separation and divorce? We have any tips? Please feel free to unmute and share if you'd like.
I'll say something. This is Sasan. I actually live in Toronto, but I just recently went through a separation, and we just actually finalized the agreement. And just reading what you had just presented, I wish I had some of these tips earlier, because I think we could have both benefited from it. A lot of our issues were more communication, and he had kids, and one of them was pretty challenging, and neither one of us knew how to deal with her, and it just sort of became an impossible situation. So hopefully I can apply these in a future relationship down the road.
Thank you so much for mentioning that, Susan. And I would suggest as well, you know, if you are bringing these to a new relationship, or perhaps need to go back to communicating with that individual you separated from, I will provide a copy of these slides to all of you who attended today. Share these with them. And I can speak from my own experience with, you know, my husband. I can do these things on my own without telling him what's happening. And maybe he'll respond to them. Maybe he'll, you know, be like, what are you trying to do? He's, you know, a little bit that way. He's like, what are you trying to do right now? But just like you are here learning about these things today, the other person in the relationship can learn as well. And knowing how our brains work, particularly when we're in relationship with one another, is just a power to everyone in the relationship. So I would really recommend bring this relationship with you, share it with the people that you have relationships with, so you can name, oh, my amygdala is looping, I need to sit down, right? Or, oh, wow, okay, cortisol showing up, I need to walk away. And they can be like, oh, brain science. I understand, okay, this happens. It gives you another way to communicate about these things. Any other tips or thoughts from the group?
I have a question,
Yeah, Emily.
if I might ask. In a relationship that I tell the individual how I feel. I say, like, you're making me, I don't feel wanted. You're not really, I don't feel like you're really that interested in me. And so, like, the person might say, well, I'm sorry that you feel that way. And so I'll say, I'm sorry I feel that way, but I feel that way. And how do you get a person to maybe commit to making some changes? It's more like, I feel like you feel that way, but I don't think I'm making you feel that way. So is there any tips you have to let someone know that your feelings are real? You would be nice for you to respect what I'm telling you. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Great question, Emily. So it sounds like you're using the I statements and they aren't being met with a sense of responsibility. for why that feeling is occurring. Is that right?
That's true.
Okay. So, you know, I obviously don't know your particular situation. And, you know, my initial thought would be to use the I statements as a starting point, right? And when the conversation starts to progress into, I'm sorry that you feel that way, you know, you can come right out and ask the person, are you able to talk about why I feel this way right now? And I suggest posing that as a question because when they say yes, there's a sense of buy-in, right? And so when you begin talking about, well, I started feeling this way after you did this action, they asked for you to say that, right? It wasn't something you sprang on them. It wasn't out of the blue, like, you did this, I feel bad about it. It was a conversation that they agreed to. And so I would recommend, you know, using a question to bring them into the conversation, and then continuing to use that I language, focusing it on how you feel and connecting it to the catalyst of whatever that particular action or situation was that caused it. And one way to avoid the use statement, right? Because we all naturally go to, well, when you did this, we all naturally fall towards that. And it can be difficult to avoid it or think of alternatives at the time. One way to avoid that is to talk about the situation, right? So the situation of the fridge door being open for an hour and not being closed really made me upset. Name the situation, leave the players out of it. And that may be able to lead everyone into the conversation in a way that is non-defensive and problem-solving with a solution-focused mindset. Okay, well, how do we fix this situation? Now we're having a conversation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does help. It does help. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, I'm not familiar with anyone's particular situations. And so if you find yourself in a particularly difficult interaction that maybe these tips don't help with, relationship therapists can be very helpful to have both people in a room do the interactions in front of a third party, right? And they can help to identify, okay, let me objectively tell you what I just saw. Because we all have things that we do that we may not even see, that may be impacting our communication or how we receive the other person or vice versa. So that's certainly a tool in our toolbox as well, is working with a therapist in the relationship. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for your thoughts. And in respect of time, I want to move on to our other topic of romantic relationships. So this quote from Helen Fisher, a biological anthropologist, was included in AARP's article about love in later life. And Helen shares that the brain pathways responsible for feeling love are the same, whether you're 2.5 or 92.5. And, you know, one of those chemicals is that oxytocin we talked about earlier. New relationships can blossom at any age, despite physical or cognitive challenges. And it's increasingly common for older adults to seek new intimate relationships and partners. And this can be a very positive and life-affirming experience. Regardless of how old we are, healthy brains learn new information, they create and remember memories, they adapt to changes and challenges, and they communicate who we are as people through our personality, behaviors, and beliefs. Helen also offers that not only do older adults know what they want, they're also less likely than younger counterparts to compromise on what's most important to them. Research shows that older adults are more grounded in what they believe in, what they find meaningful, who they are. And I want to open it up to the group. Have you experienced any changes in romantic relationships as you aged? Is there anything you'd like to share for conversation?
This is Ricardo. I might take a shot a little bit, although I don't bring any particular expertise. For me, I think transparency has become more prominent and necessary. And I also don't think a romantic model that existed when I was 40, 50, 30 years old applies anymore. Doesn't have to. I don't feel, and I've decided not to follow the traditional relationship model. And what that means to me is that I don't have an expectation that we're going to move in together, that we're going to get married going into the relationship. In fact, I'd like it not to be like that. And that gives me a new insight, and it helps me sort out maybe the person that I'm having coffee dates with or engaging with, to see if they're receptive to following a different model than what we've all come to be familiar with, up to this point or from earlier times in our life. I've also done online dating, and I realize it's not for everybody, and it's challenging in its own way. However, as the other people have mentioned, some people have mentioned earlier in this program, that we don't have the same access to meeting people that we might have had in the past, although I did experiment with that to the best I could, like at the grocery store, engaging with a woman over the produce, things like that. It's another way to do it, but it didn't really get the results I had hoped for. But yeah, things are very different at our age, and I think we have to adapt with that if we're hoping to bring somebody new into our life.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ricardo. And you do bring some expertise. You bring your expertise and your experience, right? And we all do that. And I really want to highlight what you shared about living separately. That is not the first time that I've heard that mentioned in these conversations. I have a note here. Forgive me while I move to it. But you really name something important in the idea of moving beyond the typical expectations of marriage to create the partnership that you want. Living apart together, also kind of shortened to LAT, is the idea of maintaining separate households. And I was reading about a couple that maintained their separate households, and they alternated spending time together at each residence, and also some time alone, because that was extremely important to them as individuals too. So just to perhaps put a name to what Ricardo was describing a bit, in case that can be helpful to anyone. Any other thoughts on how you've seen relationships change with age?
I found in my younger years it was easier, and I'm 55 now, and starting all over, I see like the age group, that I'm in is different, you know, because the 55 to the 60s are looking for someone in their 30s and 40s. And I did go on some dating sites, and they actually have an age limit. And a lot of these guys just want, the max they'll go to is like 48, 49. And it didn't occur to me that, you know, I guess it should have, that the older you get, the harder it is. But I joined Meetup, which is where I found this webinar. And I found that's actually really helpful because you meet like-minded people. They have groups for like 50 and above, 40 and above. And so and then they have single events around the similar age group. And I find those are actually quite nice because you're under no pressure, right? You go and you may get a few friends out of it. But it definitely is challenging, at least from my perspective. Because also I don't have kids, and I don't want to meet anyone that has kids, which puts in another thing, because I went through so much with my ex's kids, and it's very difficult being a stepmother. I wasn't prepared for it. And unless the kids are older and on their own, then it's, you know, so that puts another dynamic into it.
Mm. Thank you. It sounds like you are really grounded in what you're looking for, or some elements anyway. Based on...
Yeah, I know what I need to work on. Like his daughter, I was just gonna send her like just an email based on what I've learned here, just to, you know, maybe down the road she and I could have a relationship. I mean, I met her when she was 4, but she was a very angry, challenging child, and you know, I'd never been really around kids, and my career was traveling all the time, and so looking at it from this perspective, is she had her own emotional stresses that she was going through. But I know now, like, what I want in a relationship, what my boundaries are, what I cannot put up with. I was reading an article about karmatic relationships, you know, so it's been very interesting, actually. Maybe something good will come out of all of this.
What is a karmatic relationship?
So I believe in karma, and I was just today was looking at it, and I feel like, did I do something that, you know, I feel like I'm getting all this bad karma, and I was reading, well, how do you change that? And they feel sometimes when you're in a relationship, there's so much, I don't know how to, like, there's so much angst between the couple. Like, there's just so much, I don't even know what the word is. Like, he and I were just two very dynamic, I guess you could say, individuals. I'm not doing a good job explaining it at all,
Sure.
but if someone wants to read up on it, I was just actually reading a few paragraphs this morning, because I'm just trying to understand the whole situation. I got married later in life, and I didn't think I would end up being divorced. And so and I want to make sure I don't make the same mistakes again, going to a similar relationship again, right? So that's another
Understood. Yeah. So San, if you don't mind, type that phrase karmatic relationship into the chat so folks know how to spell it in case they're interested in learning more.
Okay. Sure.
Thank you. And I want to highlight something you named too, that isn't in this presentation, but I should really add it, and that's the idea of ageism. And sexism may also, you know, fit in a bit. There's this idea that as we age, we lose value, ageism, and sexism can be a layer on that, because particularly in American society, women lose the most value, according to this idea. And you can see that in how anti-aging products are marketed, that idea of stay young, dye your hair. However it may show up, our society is really filled with these messages of, in order to remain valuable, you need to be young. And so I definitely want to name that ageism, may play a role in this process as well. And I'll name two things. Research indicates that to help combat ageism, education, right? Being able to talk about what ageism is and how it shows up is one step. And the second really powerful intervention is contact. Meeting people of different ages, getting them in the same place and interacting, right, helps to just naturally, through having positive interactions with older people or younger people, that ageism starts to be chipped away, and the perspective can start to be changed. So I just want to name that as a potential barrier as well. One of the ideas that comes up in these conversations is intimacy, and intimacy can change as we get older, maybe what it looks like. Many older adults turn away from sex, perhaps after losing a partner. Maybe some side effects of the medication we're taking impacts our desire to even have sex. Medical conditions can also impact, and there may be whatever other reasons. We're all very unique individuals with our own needs and understandings. And research indicates that positive intimacy is good for us and our brains and our bodies on a physical level, emotional level, and spiritual level. People can struggle with mental and physical adjustments to sexual expression at any age. This is not something unique to getting older. And it's typical for us as human beings to experience times of sexual inactivity. That is common. And it is important to know that you can start having sex again at any time in life. When there are difficulties, talking to a doctor or a sex therapist can be helpful. And I want to leave you with some resources in case you'd like to read some more about this. The National Institute on Aging, Sexuality and Later Life, helpguide.org, Better Sex as You Age, the National Resource Center on LGBT Aging, and Chase Brexton has an LGBT Health Resource Center that focuses on older adults, particularly in Maryland. Meeting new people is obviously critical to dating, and some ideas obviously start with what you enjoy. Get involved in things that you find fulfilling and meaningful, and chances are the people that are there also are also enjoying that thing, which is a great place to start. A lot of you mentioned Meetup already. That is a great resource for finding both online activities and in-person activities. And as you do these things, stay open to meeting new people as you participate, but be yourself, right? As we mentioned earlier, we are even more grounded in who we are and what we need as we age. There's no need to change that as we go through. Be yourself as you meet new people. And if the relationship doesn't get off the ground, don't take it personally. It's a numbers game. Most of us would not expect to marry the first person that we date, right? So don't take it personally. If you just don't click, it doesn't get off the ground. And believe that you can make friends or find love at any age. We want to hold on to that belief, because if we start to believe that we are not capable, that may actually impact us negatively in a way of sabotaging. We may start to self-sabotage our ability to meet new people if we internalize that belief about ourselves. So really hang on to that belief that I can do this, I can meet new people, and I deserve a happy, healthy relationship. Some unique challenges to dating as we age. Bringing a new person into an established family can be difficult. I heard that hinted on in a couple shares today. This quote, be aware that you need to cultivate this relationship freshly, show up with each other's tribe, get to know each other's history and children. That keyword, get to know, and knowing that these things existed before you, and really exploring it together now. Online dating, we heard that mentioned a couple times today as well. In 2018, research showed that 29% of seniors met their date through an online dating service. And seniorplanet.org, if you are not connected with them yet, is a great resource. If you're interested in online dating or learning how to navigate it, I encourage you to check them out. They are a online senior community with tons of different classes and events run by seniors. So I would definitely recommend them. AARP has an article on protecting yourself from online dating scams. And if you suspect that you may be the victim of a scam, please call ElderSafe. Their phone number is 301-816-5099. Now, people unfortunately do prey on older people who they expect will be lonely and do whatever they want them to do with the promise of a positive relationship. And so it is very important to be grounded in the idea that, especially if you are meeting people online, dating scams are real. And if the person starts asking you for things, whether it's money or goods or services, that could be a red flag. And perhaps you're in a relationship and you're like, there's a red flag, I'm not sure though. Call ElderSafe. Let them know what you're experiencing and they can help to, maybe talk it through. And as you learn more about the person, maybe call them back. It's like, okay, I learned this, is this a dating scam? And they're a wonderful resource in that way. Particularly during the coronavirus, keep in mind, if the different restrictions and things, video chat can be a very useful tool. Video chatting to get to know someone well before meeting in person can be a tool. Communicating clearly about your preferences regarding masks, social distancing, if there are COVID precautions you want to take when meeting in person, communicating them. Getting creative, maybe limiting your dates to environments that you're both comfortable with in this new pandemic environment. And when it comes to sexual activity, using precautions that you're both comfortable with, condoms, washing up, masking, based on what you two need. So the last thing I'll offer you today, because we are over time, is if you are looking for more information or inspiration on this conversation around dating in later life, the film Age of Love, The Age of Love, is a really, great resource, and it continues the conversation. It follows the playful adventures of 30 seniors in New York who sign up for a speed dating event exclusively for 70 to 90-year-olds. And it follows them from, the pre-event and the anxiety of the thing, and to how it goes, and their comments on the whole process. So it's a really uplifting film. And if you are interested, their website is here. Let your senior center know if you're interested in a screening, and they can also help set up dating events at the senior center as well. So share this link with the senior center, share this link with the library local to your area. Libraries can now order this film for their collections. So let them know if you would like to see it in their collection, share this link so they can order it with a discount. All right, well, that is enough out of me. We're at 12:06. It's been wonderful spending time with you all. I'm going to stop the recording and open it up for any comments, questions that you'd like to share. Thank you all for being here.